It is time for a guest entry. But first, a quick disclaimer. Most of the guests I've had on were recorded through Discord due to us being long distance. If the quality dips, it's due to my connection. But I hope each of these conversations brings you new knowledge of the creative and cultural arts. Greetings, fellow travelers and storytellers. Welcome to another guest entry. Today, I have Geoffrey Golden, a writer of games and multimedia. He has developed an email RPG called The Adventure Snack, where you receive a Choose Your Path newsletter and actually have fun with your emails for once. You can find his work in the link found in the show notes. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, my wonderful audience. I'd like to introduce you all to Geoffrey Golden. Did I pronounce that right?
I pronounced it Geoffrey.
Geoffrey.
Like Geoffrey Giraffe from Toys R Us, or
perfect.
Geoffrey Rush, the once famous actor in the piano.
Yeah, so
People don't think about Geoffrey Rush much anymore. Although he did do those Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So, yeah. So I guess that's probably what he's best known for, as opposed to the piano. I should start saying Pirates of the Caribbean as opposed to the piano.
Yeah.
Check.
So Geoffrey Golden, you are a writer of multiple mediums. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
So if you can, please kind of give my audience a rundown of who you are, what you do, and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a narrative designer and video game writer. So anything having to do with a story in video games, that's in my purview. I've written for studios like Capcom, Ubisoft, Square Enix, Disney. And I have a newsletter called Adventure Snack where I write short choose your path adventure games, like interactive fiction games that I send to my subscribers, and you can play that for free at adventuresnack.com. As you said, I've worked in multiple media, so I've worked in video games primarily, but I've also done written and produced fiction podcasts, comics, board games, and tabletop RPGs.
See, this is where we're gonna have so much fun in this conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's geek out here. I'm ready. So yeah, I've been writing for over has it been 15 years, 20 years? I don't know, professionally, something like that. I always love to talk to people about the craft of writing, particularly of interactive fiction and game writing. It's a passion of mine. So yeah, let's dive in.
Awesome. Okay, so first off, I want to hear what started you on this path on creating or just storytelling in general. I would say.
I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in, I think it was like third grade. And I loved comic strips. Mm-hmm. I was so into comic strips, and I would read anything. I'd read, like Mad Magazine, but primarily, and Garfield was a big one.
Yeah.
I used to do chores for my sister, so she would give me her Garfield books.
Wow.
and I'd read them, and then I would write and draw my own comics. That was huge. I took art lessons though. I was never really great at, I never really had a hand for the art aspect, but the writing was pretty good. And in school assignments, I'd be encouraged to write. I would write fiction for the school newspaper and a humor column. And just, I got a lot of encouragement from my writing. And so I followed it as a career. And I came out to Los Angeles, and, I knew I wanted to be a professional writer, but I worked in all these different aspects of it. On the internet, there was all these comedy websites at one time, and I used to write for those. And video games was an early client of mine. I used to work I worked from game studios early on, and things just sort of clicked but it was a lifelong passion for writing.
Nice. Yeah. I've had a lifelong passion for writing in general too. My my path kind of took me on to like it was more so I wanted to create an entire universe for people to be immersed into, and that's because I was inspired from things like Marvel and like Star Wars and things like that. When it comes to my stuff, my audience knows I'm a tabletop RPG developer. It's like the focal point of this entire adventure that I've created. For you though, because you've dabbled in multiple fields, how did you manage? Like, how did you manage each one, and like what kind of sent you onto the different paths of going like to like comic book creation or maybe like writing for video games or like TV shows, or like what were the moments that took you onto those separate paths?
Yeah. So do you know The Price is Right?
Yes.
Do you know a game called Plinko?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so in Plinko is one of the classic Price is Right games.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's a big board with and there's like a bunch of like little pegs on the board, and you take what's like if you play like air hockey, like a puck, like a light puck or something like that,
mm-hmm.
and you drop it, and it kind of bounces around the board in like interesting ways. And then you end up in one of the slots below. And maybe one of them is like a new car, but one of the slots might be, $500 in groceries or whatever it is,
Yeah.
So writing, I have found, at least for myself and for the people I know, having a career as a writer in Los Angeles is kind of like playing Plinko with your career. Like I know I'm going to get a job in writing. Like I'm confident always, but for many years I just kind of took catch as catch can, people would find out about my work. I would post on stuff online, or I would be recommended from friends, and I would just do these different gigs that came my way. And so I ended up dabbling in a lot of different things. I didn't decide to specialize in games until fairly recently, just a few years ago, really. It's been a fast rise for me ever since I did, because I'd always done, I've been writing games ever since I came out to Los Angeles, but always sporadically. And so I then decided to focus on narrative design as a career, and I started just getting like job after job. And it turned out that was maybe the niche that I was best suited for. And that I am most excited about as a medium. So it worked out really well. But yeah, I just think that like when you're in early days as a writer, it's hard to get work. So I think you just kind of you kind of go from thing to thing and try to figure it out.
Yes. Can you tell us what games that you have worked on before?
So some of my favorite games that I've worked on include Murder in the Alps, which is a murder mystery mobile game with millions of players worldwide. I co-created the official Wet Hot American Summer tabletop role-playing game.
Wet Hot American Summer. Ooh, what is that?
Yeah, do you know it's a movie and Netflix series.
Oh.
That's a comedy series that's very popular and has a cult following at least. And it featured a lot of celebrities who weren't celebrities in the time. So they were all part of this project. People like Paul Rudd and Bradley Cooper were all like in the cast before they were famous. And so it's a very funny movie. And then the series is really great too. We did I worked on the official tabletop role playing game because it's a part of the movie. The original movie is D&D is part of the original movie. So I worked on that. I worked on Disney Wonderful Worlds, which is a mobile game where you create your own Disney theme park through puzzles, which is really cool. And Fallen Legion Revenants, which is an action RPG for Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation.
Oh, wow.
And it's sort of a heavy a heavy game with moral implications and lots of fast-paced action and excitement. So really runs the gamut. Oh, and one more that I really loved was Q the Clever Bot, which is an educational robot toy that teaches kids how to program. And I wrote games that kids can play with the robot in real time, and it's really neat. So if you have like a cousin or a younger sibling who is interested in programming, I recommend Q. He's a great toy.
That's actually really cool. I've never heard of anything like that before. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
They're neat. Yeah.
So how is game writing different from like traditional screenwriting, like for a video game specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it really depends on the genre of the game you're working on. In some instances, they're actually very similar. So you may be tasked to write a game's cinematics, and that game may have a linear story structure. Let's say you're writing like a platformer with cinematics. There may not be any, say, branching paths, or there may not be any variation in the story. You may be writing what feels like a traditional linear narrative. So, but I'll say this, and then of course, that goes all the way to, branching path games that feel nothing like writing a traditional screenplay, because you are mapping out complex story trees.
Yeah.
You are trying to figure out like, oh, if this character
it's like
does
choices.
This,
A
lot of choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the tasks really vary in video games. I mean, and again, by genre, like you may be asked to write a first person shooter. Maybe they only need the writer to write a bunch of barks, which is like those are like the phrases that a character says when a specific action happens, like "oh my guts," when they get hit, or "take that, idiot," when they shoot you in the head. They shoot. So and that you may be working on that kind of game for 3 weeks, but you may be working on a role playing game for 2 years, 5 years, 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, I'm sure that's like a full on like D&D campaign, because you're kind of like the game master planning out every like story thread that you could imagine, but you also have like these. It's like a structured story that the players have to like go through specifically, whereas in D&D it's like free formed improvisation when the players decide to go and be murder hobos and stuff like that.
That's true. Although there are more, there's more open world video games now that are trying to sort of emulate that, and of course with AI, with AI, I think we wonder if we'll see more games that try to basically improvise with their players in the manner like D&D. It's a very interesting time. One of the things I love about games is that they're constantly changing and evolving. With movies and television, there are very like strict sort of guidelines for like how to write them. There are books like, I don't know if you've heard of a book like Save the Cat, or Joseph Campbell's work. There are like things that are taught, like this is how a story is structured. The hero denies the question.
You have the different acts and stuff, and there's always that like resolution at the end and everything like that.
And that's not true with games. I mean, there's
no,
really,
it's not.
They vary from genre to genre. They vary from game to game. They vary from studio to studio. How you write games, really changes, depending on where you're at. So it's really cool. It always provides a new challenge on how to create a meaningful story within the guidelines and the templates and that the developers have set out. So it's really cool.
So something I want to kind of jump back to is you said something about how how AI is like being developed. Do you think that at a certain point in time, video games are going to develop NPC, like role-playing games, NPC artificial intelligence to a point where you wouldn't need like they basically make games like Dungeons and Dragons obsolete because you can just go into this video game and actually make any kinds of choices that you want, and then the artificial intelligence will react to those choices, kind of thing.
Well, the challenge is I would say yes and no. Certainly there are definitely developers who are working on a project like you're describing. The challenge is that the way these artificial intelligence systems work, at least currently, is they're trying to predict a probability from like word to word, sentence to sentence, that like what they're saying, what it is spouting is like connected to what it is saying. So in other words, it's like saying, okay, I feed the prompt like, talk like a pirate and say, give me a good grocery list for today. and the thing is like, it spouts back like, yar, you should buy eggs. And it's not saying that because it understands the prompt. It's saying it because it's the probability of each word being correct in that sentence is like it's like a high percentage.
Like it would need to know the it would need to know the language and also just the comprehension skill of the AI.
The comprehension is where you get into trouble in terms of trying to do long-term storytelling. Because you can have a pretty decent like conversation now with an AI based on a prompt. Like it will spout back something that is intelligible. Some have criticized it for being boring, but at least it's intelligible. But the problem is, can it remember its own story? Like if I go, can it figure out like, oh, okay, if I piss off this NPC, can it understand that and then give that information to to a second NPC who might be a relative of that NPC? And then, can I build the story? Like, can I build a story?
Yeah.
The other thing too is that like with D&D, any action that you want to do costs the same, at a table, right?
Yeah,
it's like if you want to have your characters, hang out in the tavern and shoot the shit, or if you want to have them fight a dragon, it costs the same amount of money. Nothing, or hopefully nothing. Or if you're paying a DM, I guess it may cost whatever that DM's rate is per hour. But generally speaking, it costs nothing. No, there's no difference. But like in video games, there's a tremendous difference because of the branching. The branching adds cost because you're adding potentially new sets. You're adding new props, new cost. New player avatar. Lines of dialogue, voice lines of dialogue. So like, sure, you could have an NPC say as a quest giver and say, have them, but let's say they tell you, okay, you need to go to the volcano and fight a dragon because it feels like that's like something that like an NPC is like likely to say in a video game.
Yeah.
Like, well, is there a video game programmed into the thing? Is there a dragon? If so, like it all has to be like rendered and stuff. So
yeah.
So anyway, I see. So yes and no. I think that maybe the first thing we'll see is like in video games, is like in big open world games, having like a vast world filled out with like NPC, with like artificially generated NPC characters with like a very limited, set of parameters to sort of fill out the space, right? So you don't need a writer to write every one of these thousands, but you could have thousands of characters, that you could potentially have a little tiny interesting, little tiny conversation with, basically. And I could see it. I could see that. That would be an interesting first step, particularly for a game that has the budget and to spend on the sort of the the experimental technology that this is, because we're still very much in early days.
Yeah, with AI, very early. But I mean, there's a lot of things going on. We don't even know. But another thing I want to ask you is you've worked on tabletop RPGs and also video games. Which one do you like best when it comes? Yes.
Oh, what a hard question. Well, the thing is that, and this has at least been true for me. Video games pay a living wage, and tabletop RPGs do not.
No.
So when it comes to my preference in terms of like which one can put food in my belly, I would say video games for sure. But when it comes to the art of it, I mean, oftentimes when I'm working on video games, I'm working for a client, whereas when I'm working on tabletop games, I'm doing work for myself on a much smaller scale. And so a lot of those projects can feel very satisfying, TTRPG projects, just because they are, they're mine, they're my vision, whereas I love to collaborate. But when you get to when you're at a big studio and you're working on a big collaboration, like you can kind of lose your voice. You sort of have to kill your babies at times.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult. But it's hard because I love making indie video games and small. Like I did a text adventure game this year. It was the highest ranked short game at this year's IF Comp, the Interactive Fiction Competition, and it was called "Use Your Psychic Powers at Applebee's." And
oh, that sounds great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. You could feel free. It's a free game. You can check it out. Check it out. If you look that up on Google, you'll find it. Use Your Psychic Powers at Applebee's. But it was a lot of fun, and it was it's a video game, but it was completely my vision, and it was fun to execute it. So yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. It's a difficult question.
Is your main system for tabletop RPGs D&D, or do you have a homebrew system that you've made that is your main one to play?
The game that I play the most is with my friends Brent and Patrick. We have an actual play podcast like yours, but it's called It's called Worst Movies Ever Played, and it's on the Starburns Audio Network, home of Harmontown and other comedy podcasts. And the premise of it is that we use our role-playing game system to improvise bad movies, like movies from the 1980s and 90s that you would find in a dumpster behind the blockbuster. Like that's the level of VHS movie we're aspiring to create. And so we just finished our second season of that, and
nice.
So we play a system. We play a system called Straight to VHS from Lost Cat Games, which is a rules light system that is designed specifically for movies, for playing through movies. And it's a lot of fun. It has a lot of really wacky powers and abilities and stuff, and a really good structure for movie making games. So that's the one I've probably played the most, at least recently. But I've played my fair share of D&D and also some Powered by the Apocalypse as well. Yeah, all have their pluses and minuses. But yeah, I love TTRPGs.
Awesome. Is there a favorite genre that you have, when it comes to even writing or even just playing games?
I mean, I am. I came up as a comedy writer, and I love humor. So I'll pretty much attach myself to any. I actually enjoy hopping from genre to genre if I can just add some of my trademark humor to it.
Yeah,
and I feel, I actually enjoy. Yeah, I'll tackle any genre, sci-fi or fantasy. horror. I'll try anything as long as I can get sort of a foothold in it with my style. And even when I can't, it's interesting. Like what I was saying earlier about Fallen Legion, that game had a little bit of humor in it, but for the most part, it was pretty grim and serious. And but I liked the challenge of trying to write something that was more powerful and full of moral quandaries. It was really interesting, but my home style is always humor. So, and with Adventure Snack, I hop around from genre to genre. So every game I put out, I do twice a month. I email games to my subscribers, and every issue of it is a different genre. So I like to be a chameleon in that way.
That's great. And also, I feel like having those moments inside even grim, dark, like gritty stories with just having those moments of comedic relief. Like that's why you have the comedy relief character inside of it, so that it's not always so grim, or else you're just like, oh gosh, why am I watching this or reading this or whatever.
It becomes an upsetting experience. It becomes tough.
Yeah.
Who wants that?
Yeah,
I mean, some people do, but I'm not a big fan of the DC universe. So
DC is. I don't even know what's going on with DC at this point. Actually, I also have another question for you. You've worked for like bigger, big name companies. How was your experience with working with them, and do you feel like they've changed as the industry has changed with the culture?
How do I feel in terms of working with bigger companies?
And like how does that whole process kind of work out? I'm curious.
Well, when you're working for a big company, I mean, so I've worked as both a contractor and I've worked as an employee with big studios.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really depends on the company culture. Like, I've worked for some studios where it's like you are a cog in that machine. Like, they have a set of things, of assets that they need, and you are just cranking them out. I've worked for others where it's very creative and collaborative environment. The department that I work for, will be, everybody's very, we're having writers meetings and stuff, and we're working together and jamming on stuff. So it really depends. It's I don't know that things have. The big thing that's changed, I think, at least in recent years, is the pandemic allowing people to work from home, and I think it has changed. Some of that culture, although I find, if in the old days, there's a company, the company I'm currently working for, the studio I currently work for, they're based in Los Angeles, but the job is entirely remote. I find myself in meetings all the time, collaborating all the time, as if I were in an office.
Yeah, because you're probably like on Zoom, like constant, and it's just...
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It's, it really depends.
Well, okay. Well, now I want to get into more of like the storytelling based stuff with your adventures. Is there a specific story that you can kind of elaborate on that you've created that you enjoy telling?
A story that I enjoyed telling. There, I'll give you an example from my TTRPG work. I worked on a series called Helm Greycastle for Image Comics. It was a collaboration with my friend Henry Barajas, who's a very talented comics writer. And basically he asked me to write a D&D campaign that was set in the world of the comic. So the idea would be that you could read the comic and then you could in the series, and it's really cool. It's an Aztec fantasy series, so it's like
Aztec. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat and unique setting for the fantasy space. And I really enjoyed that process because he gave me a lot of creative freedom, and I was like, I was able to like design a dungeon that it was a temple. I don't want to like, I guess I don't want to like spoil it. But it's a temple with a very interesting and deadly history. And as the players learn that history, they become more in danger. And the walls sort of close in around them, so to speak, in this temple.
A bunch of booby traps.
Yeah, there's plenty of booby traps. Yeah, including one major booby trap that is anyway. So you can get it to Image Guide, but I really enjoyed the process because it was really fun collaborating with him. He gave me some guidelines, but then he let me sort of take the reins and do what I do. And then we had a great playtesting session where we found some things that really worked and other things that needed to be tweaked, which is a major part of the process, is playtesting.
Yes, exactly.
And then we did it. Then we playtested it some more, and it worked really well. And that was just a great process and a really fun story to tell because it was a world that I wasn't as familiar with. I had to do a bunch of research. And so it was really cool to just sort of dive in and try something new and different. So yeah.
And you also said that you do you write like narratives for like podcast stuff too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I have done that fiction like I've done audio fiction,
nice,
as well as I say actual plays and things like that.
Yeah, so like for this podcast, when I first started it, I used it as a way to just tell the lore behind my universe, and then in season 3 of it, because right now we're in season 4, but season 3 it was more like a fictional like storytelling with occasional game sessions inside of it to like kind of like, and I did like sagas, and it's an anthology where like you learn about certain characters in different places throughout the universe, and it's all kind of converging into one storyline. But like when it comes to like writing narratives for like podcasts, do you write like just like one episode per thing, or do you like do like little mini series that the voice actors do, and do you voice act for them actually?
So I have done some voice acting. I used to do, when I was a kid, I used to do radio commercials. And I've done voice acting and DJing, and so, like, not in the DJ like a party sets, but DJing like a radio DJ.
Yeah.
I've done that for many years. I enjoy doing it. It's always fun when I get the opportunity to voice a character. I always really dig it. So, it depends. So I've done work for clients in interactive fiction where I've written like pilots, say, in audio fiction, where I've written pilots. I think for the most part, we'll probably do, if we're going to do it audio fiction, we're going to plan a series. And that's the first thing I do is I'll probably, write out like a character Bibles, a plot, the sort of plot out the arc of the season, if there is an arc, or just come up with the different episodes that they're going to be, before I start writing script. So it'll be, it's a process. I typically wouldn't like just start. I would never like just dive into a script. Like I'll always outline before. I always want to have an idea of what my ending is, because that's like the worst when you go and you have a great idea for like a beginning of a story and you write it and then you get kind of lost in the middle. Yeah. And usually when you get lost in the middle, it's because you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that like outline is a really helpful tool. Even if you don't use it, even if you change it, partway through the process, having that like confidence that like your story is really important. And that's why I like to try to map out a season, if I'm going to do a season of a show, because I want to have a sense of where the whole thing is going before I actually start diving into script.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the same kind of mindset that I have when it comes to planning out my campaigns and just like where I want the players to end up. I don't know exactly how it's going to end up happening, but at a certain point, some things need to cross paths in order for them like to have some kind of conflict resolution throughout the game, for the players to feel like they're being challenged enough, but also be able to push through those challenges. And like that, I feel like that's the whole point of games and movies and shows, because you want some kind of conflict, and you want to. That conflict has to come at a climax event inside the series or show or wherever you're doing, and then the main characters need to push past that. It's like it's the hero's journey, The
hero's journey, yeah. But it's interesting with D&D because it's it can be, as you said, difficult to plan.
Yes,
when your characters have a minds of their own, so to speak. They might not want to follow your breadcrumbs.
No, they want to go into the woods. They want to go into the woods, and you're just like, wait, the main plot point is over there in the city. Why are you going into the woods? I want to go hunting.
Always, yeah. I remember one time I was playing a game. I was playing a game of straight to VHS with my friends, and we had a group of Russian mafia men were like coming to get us, and we decided the DM had imagined that we were going to like get that we were going to like fortify our home and and protect ourselves, and instead we decided to hold a borscht festival to see if we could I guess come to terms with the Russian mobsters. and the DM had definitely not had any plans that we were going to have a borscht festival, and so we'll call it, whenever we go off tangent or something like that, we'll call it a borscht festival. So yeah,
that's pretty good. Wow. Yeah, I thankfully, what's weird is, whenever I've been the GM for any of my games, my players have always been good about going down a path that I can at least improvise down, and not to where it just breaks the entire story. It actually works with the story. They always manage to work with the story, which is a blessing for me. Which is a blessing for me.
Absolutely. And I think it also shows that maybe you're on a good wavelength with them. That that the choices that they want to make are the ones that you want them to take on. So there, it shows maybe a bit of some camaraderie there with you and your players, which is really great for an actual play.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any crazy experiences with players?
Oh, in general?
Yeah, in general. Like what is the craziest experience that you've had with one of your players?
Oh my goodness.
That's the
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any like wacky stories come to mind. I mean, for the most part, the people who have like play tested the games I've worked on, or they've been pretty just cool. They've been pretty chill. I mean, a lot of the games I make are like funny and weird games. So like they'll
do funny and weird things.
They'll do funny and weird things, right? Because that's what the story's prompting them to do. But they're not like weird, strange people or whatever. It's not like anybody who like went off the rails or made everybody uncomfortable or anything like that. They're just doing what's prompted.
Yeah. I know. Like there's some game tables where they'll some players who are just now who are just starting out don't understand like what is going on, so they'll just do the most wacky, insane things that they could do because it's just imagination, and they're just thinking like, okay, I can just do whatever I want. They're not really caring about it. So like there'll be like players who that's where like the murder hobo comes into play, where just characters will just go around and then realize they have a bunch of power stronger than an average NPC, and then go and kill someone and be like, oh crap, I have power here.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, you know, in a game where there are few limitations, yeah, people sort of take that as carte blanche sometimes. You know, but I think the fun of D&D isn't so much that you have no limits. It's that you and your friends are exploring the limits of your collective imagination.
Yes. Yeah, it's a collaborative storytelling experience, and the more you collaborate with everyone at the table, the more emotion you'll have, and then the more connection you'll have with your character. Because as soon as that character dies, I've had my characters die before, like big characters, or my allies at the table who they have died. I've cried for their deaths, and it's like it's actually an emotional experience because you've gone through so much with this story.
No, I this happens to me when I'm writing, where I'll write a character and I'll have them do something, and it'll give me an emotional response just because like I can empathize with the character to that point. That was something that happened on Fallen Legion, where I actually like wrote a scene that like made me cry.
Wow.
I was just like so deeply invested in it, and it was really a heartbreaking story. And I realized it had to be like, at first I was writing it and I was like plotting it out, and it was like, oh, you know what, this could be a happy ending. And then I realized like, oh no, it can't be.
Yeah.
No, that the math doesn't work out for that. This is going to be really depressing to write. And then when I actually finally read, that was in the outline. Then when I actually wrote it, it was a really gut wrenching experience. So
sometimes you need those like stories to tell. Like honestly, because in the background I've been working on a bunch of different like series following different characters, like my players and stuff. One of the series is going to be like it's a 21 session series, and my player plays two characters inside of it. One of them is an evil character, and one of them is a good character who's just had a rough time of it, and I put them up against each other, so basically they have to fight each other by the end of it. And it's just the build up and then the climax is just it's a tragic story, and it's gut wrenching. It's amazing, and it is on the level of some of the best role playing I've seen from casts like Critical Role and like even in film. Like it's some great stuff. And every time I think about it, it tugs at my heartstrings because of just how deeply emotional the entire series kind of built itself up to be.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when these things do their job, it's when great art like touches our souls, right? I mean, in some way, it makes us feel something, and that's why, like, I'm not somebody who I don't focus a lot on plot. I'm not big into plot, really. I like a good high concept. Like I like a fun broad concept. But really, when I invest in a story, when I'm writing a story, I'm really thinking from the character's perspective, because that is what gives you the window into the emotions of the piece. Of what are we supposed to feel about this?
Yes.
About this, and it's with the plot. It's like a plot could be almost any. I mean, could be almost anything. But how the characters respond in a situation, I think that's that's when things get deep. And investing in the characters, I think you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, and also it's not even just that, but like the characters themselves is your window into the world surrounding you. So you're learning about the world through the lens of the characters.
That's right, and their opinions of the world, I think, are more important than the objective facts of the world.
Yeah.
The way that they live, the way that they're treated, the way that their families are, are the jobs that they have, and the way that they deal with their day-to-day lives. That, to me, that's much more interesting than, there's a mountain called this mountain, and it does that, and it does this every 3 years or whatever. It's like I want to know, like, oh, okay, if that mountain blows up, like, has this group of this town is going to have to move their whole town because the volcano is finally going to explode. How tragic, how heartbreaking. That's
something relatable.
That's when I connect. That's when I connect to the story.
Yes, like whenever you're writing something like a fact about the world or something like that, like tie people to that fact in some regard, so that it you can relate to it in some way.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's nice.
As I believe that I have only a little bit more time. Let me see. What's some more questions I can ask you?
Oh, better get the good ones in.
Yeah.
Get the good ones in.
What's the strangest medium you've designed a game for?
Oh, that's a great question. I told you about a robot toy that I worked on.
Yes,
but it's not the only robot toy I've worked on. So as an independent project with a friend of mine, Jordan, who at the time was an audio engineer, we decided to. Okay, so I don't know if you remember a toy called the 2XL. It was originally it was a 8-track toy. It was a robot toy that used 8-track player as its a very strange toy. But the version I have is a 90s version that uses an audio cassette. But basically, it's a robot that is an audio tape player. And what it does is it has 4-track. It's a 4-track audio cassette player. But okay, so you're familiar with like a classic audio cassette tape,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it has like each side has 2 tracks, left track and right track, right? And so there are 4 tracks total on the tape. There's side A, left and right, side B, left and right. So what this toy does is it plays all 4 tracks simultaneously in the same order, in the same way. And then it has 4 buttons on it that selects one of the tracks. So you can have interactivity when it says, it's like a trivia game, and it's like, I'm 2XL, like, who was the first president of the United States? Was it George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Richard Nixon, or, President whoever?
Yeah.
So you press the 1 button, and that plays track 1, and it says, congratulations, you are correct. But if you press the 3 button, it would say, you are an idiot. You got it completely wrong. But there's no computer element to it. It's just very cleverly mimicking what a computer does. So we decided we were going to make the first new game for the Tiger 2XL in 25 years. And we did. We created it. I voiced it and wrote it and voiced it, and Jordan produced it. and it's called Facts About the Robot Uprising. And the premise of the game is it's a trivia game where the 2XL is going to try to prepare you for the carnage coming to humanity that the robots like him will bring about. And it was a lot of fun to do it. I took it to comedy clubs, and I would do it as a weird act, where the audience would pick the choices.
That's cool.
We did it at Indiecade. It was featured at Indiecade, which is an independent games festival based in Los Angeles, and though they're international, and so it was really fun. It was a lot of fun working on that project. I would say the Tiger 2XL is probably the most obscure medium that I've worked on for sure.
That is definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's not for not everybody has heard of it, but it's there. It's a really neat toy. It was a really cool toy, and so it was really fun to put something together for that.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up to the end of the podcast. Is there any places? Well, can you name off all the places that people can find you at? Absolutely.
Well, let's see. For the time being, you can find me on Twitter at Geoffrey Golden. That's GeoFFrey, like the giraffe, Golden, like the color. So I'm on Twitter, but the best way to follow me is probably my newsletter, which I talked about earlier, Adventure Snack at adventuresnack.com.
That will be in the link of the description. So
that's great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a real pleasure.
Yes, and we could do it again in the future. Actually, I'm working on a beginner module for my game, and I'm going to be doing playtests sometime in 2023. I haven't decided yet. So if you're open to it, I'd love to have on a bunch of people and do like a playtest of it too. Yeah.
I'm happy to help.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. This was a blast. I liked picking at your brain a little bit.
Well, thank you. It was fun to be picked, I suppose. Much appreciated.
I thank you for listening to our conversation. If you want to have fun reading over your emails, be sure to try out adventuresnack.com to sign up for Geoffrey's interactive story newsletter. There is a link in the description of this episode. Also, if you'd like to explore more of the new expanding universe, there are links for that as well. Until next time, travelers, be safe, stay safe, and if death comes to you, may you be reborn in power.